The Turnip. There were once two brothers who both served as soldiers. One of them was rich and the other poor. Then the poor one, to escape from his poverty, took off his soldier's coat and became a farmer. He dug and hoed his bit of land and sowed it with turnip seed. The seed came up, and one turnip grew there, which became large and healthy, and visibly grew bigger and bigger, and seemed as if it would never stop growing. Some say it might have been called the Princess of Turnips, for never was such a one seen before, and never will such a one be seen again. It was so enormous that by itself it filled a whole cart, and 2 oxen were required to pull it. The farmer had not the slightest idea what he was to do with the turnip, or whether it would be a fortune to him or a misfortune. At last he thought,
"If I sell it, what will I get for it that's of any importance? And if I were to eat it myself, would the small turnips not do me just as good? No, it would be better for me to take it to the king and to give it to him as a present."
So he placed it on a cart, harnessed 2 oxen, and took it to the palace to be presented to the king.
"What a strange thing is this! Many wonderful things have come before my eyes, but never such a monster as this. From what seed can this have sprung? Or are you a luck child and have met with it by chance?" "Oh no, I am no luck child. I am a poor soldier who, because he could no longer support himself, hung up his soldier's coat on a nail and took to farming land. I have a brother who is rich and well known to you, dear king, but I, because I have nothing, am forgotten by everyone."
Then the king felt compassion for him and said,
"You shall be raised from your poverty, and shall have such gifts from me that you shall be equal to your rich brother."
Then he bestowed on him much gold and lands, meadows and herds, and made him immensely rich, so that the wealth of the other brother could not be compared with his. When the rich brother heard what the poor one had gained for himself with one single turnip, he envied him, and thought in every way how he could get hold of a similar piece of luck. He would, however, set about it in a much wiser way, and took gold and horses and carried them to the king, and made certain that the king would give him a much larger present in return. If his brother had got so much for one turnip, what would he not carry away with him in return for such beautiful things as these? The king accepted his present, and said he had nothing to give him in return that was much more rare and excellent than the great turnip. So the rich man was obliged to put his brother's turnip in a cart and have it taken to his home. When there, he did not know on whom to vent his rage and anger, until bad thoughts came to him, and he decided to kill his brother. He hired murderers who were to lie in ambush, and then went to his brother and said,
"Dear brother, I know of a hidden treasure. We will dig it up together and divide it between us."
The other agreed to this, and accompanied him without suspicion. While they were on their way, however, the murderers fell on him, bound him, and would have hanged him to a tree. But just as they were doing this, loud singing and the sound of a horse's feet were heard in the distance. On this, their hearts were filled with terror, and they pushed their prisoner headfirst into the sack, hung it on a branch, and took off. He, however, worked up there until he had made a hole in the sack through which he could put his head. The man who was coming by was no other than a travelling student, a young fellow who rode his way through the wood joyously singing his song. When the farmer saw that someone was passing below him, he cried,
"Good day! You have come at a lucky time."
The student looked around on every side, but did not know where the voice came from. At last he said,
"Who calls me?"
Then the answer came from the top of the tree.
"Raise your eyes. Here I sit in the sack of wisdom. In a short time I have learned great things. Compared with all this, schools are a jest. In a very short time I have learned everything, and shall descend wiser than all other men. I understand the stars, and the signs of the zodiac, and the tracks of the winds, the sand of the sea, the healing of illness, and the virtues of all herbs, birds, and stones. If you were once within it, you would feel what noble things issue forth from the sack of knowledge."
The student, when he heard all this, was astonished and said,
"How lucky am I to have found you! May not I also enter the sack for a while?"
He who was above replied as if unwilling,
"For a short time I will let you get into it, if you reward me and give me good words. But you must wait an hour longer, for one thing remains which I must learn before I do it."
When the student had waited a while, he became impatient and begged to be allowed to get in at once. His thirst for knowledge was so very great. So he who was above pretended at last to give up and said,
"In order that I may come forth from the house of knowledge, you must let it down by rope, and then you shall enter it."
So the student let the sack down, untied it, and set him free. Then he said,
"Now draw me up at once,"
and was about to get into the sack.
"Stop, that won't do,"
and took him by the head, and put him upside down inside the sack, fastened it, and drew the disciple of wisdom up the tree by the rope. Then he swung him in the air and said,
"How goes it with you, my dear fellow? Behold, already you feel the wisdom coming, and the art of gaining valuable experience. Keep perfectly quiet until you become wiser."
Then the farmer mounted the student's horse and rode away, but in an hour's time sent someone to let the student down again.